Hello, everybody, and welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today, if I can get my voice, today it is Friday, the 8th of December, 2023. I'm just getting over a little bit of a cold. That's why I didn't do any videos earlier this week. Something got me, but it seems minor, whatever it is. And so if I'm clearing my throat, I'm just struggling with a little bit of congestion. Other than that, I'm fine. And the show must go on, as they say. Today, I want to pick up where I left off with this 14900K build where we tried the Be Quiet cooler. There's not an air cooler that I'm aware of that will cool the 14900K when you push it hard. So I decided to look around for what all-in-one liquid coolers might be able to do the job. And you know, it's going to have to be a pretty serious heavy-duty liquid cooler for this high-end flagship Intel chip that is a very high power and high heat generating when it's pushed. So if you're just idling at the desktop, it's not a big deal. And if you're never really pushing your computer that hard very often, an air cooler will be fine. It's okay for it to get hot and cool back down. What we don't want is we don't want it to get hot and stay hot for a lengthy period of time, which some people do on the tasks that they ask of their computer. They can be quite resource intensive. So I'll let each of you decide which category you fit into for you to decide whether or not an air cooler would be good enough for you. I decided to try this EK-Nucleus all-in-one. This is the CR360 Dark. I decided I don't want any RGB on this build. I want it all completely blacked out, kind of old school. And I was looking for the parts list and just ran out of time. So after the show today, I will gather the parts list for the CPU, the RAM, the motherboard, the storage, the cooler, the case, and then whatever power supply I decide to use. The case we're using today is the NZXT H7. It's a pretty large size full tower case. I could have done the H5. It will fit in there, but I just thought it was kind of a beast of a computer. So let's put it into a beefier case that'll be a little easier to get in and out of and a little more breathing room. It's not that much, the H7 is not that much bigger than the H5. And I really like the look of it. And it's a pleasure to work in that case. I should say NZXT has never ever sponsored this channel. They've never sent us anything for review. Everything I use from NZXT, I purchase with the funds generated through super chat contributions and through memberships and other YouTube revenue. And they're my choice. When I'm picking a case for myself or for customers, NZXT makes some of the best cases, in my opinion, except that they all have glass. So in a scenario where a business client wants a computer, the NZXTs are not the best choice. However, for everybody else, they're a pleasure to work on. And since most people watching YouTube videos are going to be hobbyists and enthusiasts anyway, it's a good, solid value for what you're getting for the money. And as I mentioned, it's a pleasure to work on. I've worked on 1,000 different computer cases of different designs, and there's very few that stand out to be a pleasure to work on or work in. Let me give you a shout out and a thank you to the contributions. So many generous people have contributed prior to the show starting. So a shout out and thank you goes to, go to the beginning. Paul O'Brien contributes €5. He said, let's get this party started with the fairy tale of New York in honor of Shane MacGowan, a legend of Ireland. Right on. All right. Planet Cryos with $5 says, it isn't Friday without this in our life. Good to see everyone. Thank you, Planet Cryos. Thank you, Paul O'Brien. 3D Everything renews membership, now a member for 18 months. That is awesome. Thank you so much for continuing to support the channel. 3D Everything says, hello, Uncle Carey and Auntie Marilena in chat. Welcome in, welcome in. Thank you for renewing your membership. Ben Laird joins us from Scotland with a £5 super chat contribution and says, hello all from Scotland. Our friend Planet Cryos again with a $2 super chat. He says, you want it? This is where you get it. That's right. That should be my slogan. Mike Dane Jr. with a $10 super chat said, "This is from my father saying thank you to everyone for their prayers. He will be back on very soon." That is awesome. That's great news. We can't wait to see him. And thank you for the contribution and the update on your father's status. Planet Cryos again with a $2 super chat. So let's get the show started. Hello, Carey and all. I love your enthusiasm. Thank you again. Our friend Rick Lakes from Minnesota contributes $5 in super chat and says hello. Our friend Mark Gaines joining us from Northern Ireland with a £10 contribution says hello, Carey, Marlena, and everyone in chat. Hello, Mark. Thank you, my friend. Slappy became a new member here. Welcome in, Slappy, to the Tech Club. Remember, every Monday we do members-only videos, and those are available only to members, never available to the public. However, if you become a member, you can go back and see all the members-only videos you've missed. The beauty, I think, of the members-only videos is the one-on-one interaction with a much smaller crowd. So you have a much better chance of interacting with me, and things are a lot less formal since I don't have to worry about public harassment. So there are some items for discussion on the members-only videos that I would not put out publicly for my own security. I know the people there that are members are not out to harass me. They support the show. And one thing I know about the harassers is they won't spend a dime. So it's a very simple solution to being able to isolate and separate the people who are here for the right reason from the people who are here for the wrong reason. Some people just assume a content creator just wants more viewers. The downside of having more viewers is you get more harassment. So I would rather have a smaller group of dedicated or kind viewers, considerate viewers, than to have a million where it's, half jerks and it's a little of everything, quite honestly. And you can't tell the good from the bad. It's really hard to know what somebody's intentions are when they leave a message that isn't very clear, if it was meant as a joke, if it was meant as an insult. And then the chat room gets very chaotic, and it can be very frustrating for both the content creator and the viewers who feel like they're not being heard or seen when the content creator is getting overwhelmed with requests. So bigger isn't always better, not in my mind. I'd much rather have a smaller, tight-knit community that looks out for each other. And I thank you all for being a part of that. And again, for the members, that tight-knit community gets their own video and their own a way to contact me more directly without me wondering what their intention is. So bear that in mind. And again, with your membership, you're helping keep me free from being a corporate spokesman, having to go out and promote products to pay the bills. I prefer to showcase the work I do in my real life IT repair business and managed service providing business. Well, at the same time, sometimes there are computers we build here for viewers, and that also is just another source of content. Same with repair. Sometimes viewers will send their computers in for repair. It doesn't often make sense when so many viewers are on the East Coast. I think 2/3 of the United States population lives on the eastern side of the country. So to ship your computer to the exact opposite side, it takes quite a while, and it can be quite expensive. Depending on the computer, it could be worth it. And then, of course, shipping it to me and then me shipping it back introduces additional damage back and forth. So assuming it's packed well when it's being shipped to me, of course, I pack it the way I know how to pack it, shipping it back. Still a chance for damage, and that would be a shame to go through the effort, the time to get everything all fixed up, send it back, and then have it damaged and shipping on the way back. So it's obviously better if you find somebody locally. However, I've had some people that say, look, there's nobody around me I trust. It's worth paying the extra money to have you do it. And besides, no one else is going to make a video showing the diagnostic for free. So I'm like, yeah, well, send along. So as long as people have the right expectations, understanding the time and the expense involved, We certainly enjoy helping out our viewers as much as we can, and the viewers enjoy helping each other out. So if you have any problems or any questions, always be sure and jump into a live show and just ask the chat room. You don't necessarily need to ask me. We have a very smart group of people here who are also very courteous, and they'll do their best to try and assist you with whatever computer problem you're having. Some people try to reach out to me privately, and that's fine if you're a member. But if you're not a member, I don't have enough bandwidth to deal with all the incoming requests. But I always make time for the members, and I always make time to support the people who support me. That's really important for me to let those supporters know how much they're appreciated, and to let others know that if they want to encourage this community and they're seeking free help, they can jump into a live chat. If they want my personal help, they can become a member, or they can hire me. So a lot of people don't get that. They're looking for free advice, and they don't seem to appreciate the community we've got here. So if they don't appreciate that, it's not inclined to help, right? In some cases, people are looking for a solution to a problem. They stumble on one of my videos, and they immediately email me without knowing anything about the channel, without offering anything. They immediately start asking me to do things for them. I don't know who they are. And it's very time consuming, and there's only so many hours in the day. So if you want that kind of support and you want to be able to reach out to me, I can guarantee as a member, I always return emails to my members. I make the time, and I want to show my appreciation and make sure members know just how important they are to this channel's existence. YouTube's money is pathetic, so without the membership contributions, I'd be lucky to make 2-3 videos a month. This month, it's actually been a little bit slow for my content creation because of the number of repair jobs I've had, work that I have getting in the way. And then on top of that, like I said, I was sick. So this week has been sort of a down week for me. Thankfully, that doesn't happen very often. And thankfully, this wasn't that bad of a cold. Whatever it was, it kind of came and went in about 3 or 4 days. So I'm grateful for that. I think by Monday, I'll be 100% for sure. I'm almost there now. So to get on with today's build, I initially built this with 32 gigs of RAM when I intended to build it with 64, and then realized I didn't have 64 gigs of DDR. So I went online and I bought some non-RGB CORSAIR Vengeance DDR5 64 gig and just popped the RAM out and put that in there. So that change was made off camera. I haven't tested it or anything. I just put the RAM in there. And primarily so I didn't forget to do it later. There's nothing wrong with the RAM I was using. I just wanted something that was all black and was double the capacity. So that's what we've got in there now. I can't remember what SSD I put in here. We do have the 14900K. It took over a week for this part to arrive. So a lot of this was just sitting waiting for the EK-Nucleus. I've never used EK's all-in-ones before. I didn't even know they made them. I've heard very good things about it. So that's what we'll be installing today. And that's all going to get put into an H7 NZXT case. Now, I was going to set this up on the counter without installing it into the case, just to see if it's going to do the job. And then I realized if I do that, it's going to be very difficult afterwards to put it in to the case with the water block and everything mounted down to the board. And then also, even if it's not going to keep this chip cool, I don't know of a better cooler than this. So at that point, I'm going to have to go into the BIOS and start turning some things down. So one way or another, I guess I'm sticking with this cooler. So we might as well just go ahead and build it into the case. So that's what I'm doing today. And again, take a look here in the chat room. A shout out and a thank you to our good friend Peter Laycock, watching us from Bonnie, Scotland. And Peter, thank you as always for your generous contributions. William Lynn said, who is this PC for? This PC is for no one. This is a channel build. As such, it will be available for sale to anybody who wants to buy it in the United States. For the cost of parts, this is a pretty expensive build. We've got a $650 CPU, a $200 motherboard, $200 worth of RAM. The case isn't too bad. I think the case is $150, something like that. The cooler, I think, is $200. Of course, we'll grab Windows 10 or Windows 11, and we'll grab a license over there at VIP CDK deals. I always grab a Windows 10 Pro license and use that to activate either Windows 10 Pro or Windows 11 Pro. The license code will work either way. So even though they will charge you more for a Windows 11 Pro product key, it doesn't make any sense why anybody would buy a Windows 11 Pro product key when the Windows 10 product key is cheaper and works exactly the same. But to each their own. So those are currently US dollars, $16.16 for Windows 10 Pro product key over at VIP CDK deals using the coupon code CAREY. I've been using their product now for over 2 years. I am ecstatic to be partnered up with them and to be able to share this discount with you guys, because this is the real legitimate deal. These are real license keys. They're not stolen keys. They're not like enterprise keys or nothing like that. These are the real deal, the same kind of keys HP and Dell use. And in fact, priced about the same as what HP and Dell pay. So it's a great deal to take advantage. It's over 90% off the retail price, which is insane. And of course, if you are skeptical, be sure and just ask around in the chat room if anybody's got any thoughts about VIP CDK deals and see what they tell you. All the products are guaranteed. So if you get a license key and you have a problem with it, you have 30 days to reach out and say, hey, I need some help with this. Don't hoard the license keys and then try to use them 6 months from now, even though they're probably going to work fine. If they don't, and then you reach out for support, that's suspicious. That looks like some kind of scam you're trying to pull. Hey, I bought this product key 6 months ago and it doesn't work. What are you talking about? Who does that? So much like any other purchase you make at any store, at least here in the USA, it's a 30-day standard return period. So if you have any problems, you will be less likely to run into any obstacles or frustrations if you do it within 30 days. As I mentioned, in most cases, you're not going to have any problems. But in the rare circumstance that you do, I don't want you to have to deal with trying to explain why you had a product key for 3 months that you bought and sat on, so that they're convinced you're not trying to pull a scam. It's just frustrating for everybody. So I say wait till you need the product keys, buy them as you need them. That way, if there's any problem, you can reach out to their support. They will help you right away. They will resolve the problem one way or another. If in a rare circumstance that there's some miscommunication, you guys just aren't communicating well, reach out to me directly and I'll make sure to get to the bottom of it. I want to make sure that you know anything I'm promoting here on the channel, I personally guarantee. I don't know any other content creator that does that. This is a business I'm running here. And the YouTube channel is sort of a spin-off of that business, so you can see the inner workings of the logic I use when I'm buying parts and some of the frustrations and challenges I face as a system builder and then doing technical support that you may not have ever considered. Being a home user, you may not think a lot of this stuff is that big of a deal until you run it at scale. You may not think a $10 difference is that big of a deal, except when you're buying 20, 30, 40, multiple quantities, that $10 becomes $300, $400, $500. And you're dealing with a product that doesn't have good support, then it makes it look to my customer that I'm not offering support, even though I'm the one that's not getting support from the manufacturer. The customers didn't buy from the manufacturer, they bought from me. So if my hands are being tied from the manufacturer, what do I say to the client? Nothing acceptable, nothing the client's going to find acceptable. So when I'm looking for parts, it's got to be a good value. There's got to be the ability for me to make a profit in it without having my computers cost so much more than anybody else's. The products have to be reliable. Because there's so little profit, I need to be able to once the system is sold, as much as possible, not deal with any support calls. If I get one support call, there's no profit in it. Now I'm breaking even. If I get 2 support calls, now it's costing me money to to sell a computer. And on top of that, I'm getting frustrated. The client's getting frustrated. There's a good chance neither one of us will want to do business with the other one if the client is, in my opinion, being a pain in the rear, or they're just grossly unlucky. That is what comes along with this business. So I've got to be very careful over the parts I'm selecting because they're representative of the quality of what I build. And if there is a problem with anything, I need to be able to fix it quickly, both for the cost that it's costing me, the time that it's costing me. I need to minimize that as much as possible. And for the inconvenience to the client who's down until the machine's back up and running. And even when it's covered at no cost to the client, they're still not happy about being down. So even that can cost the future business of a client. So all these things, and there's so much more that home users don't have to worry about. But that's why I make these videos. That's why I have this channel. It's to open your mind and open your eyes to the business side of things. Because if you operate your own home as a business, as most of us really do, I mean, you've got payables, you've got income, and you've got bills. You are running a business if you're running a household. And if you follow business practices when you choose your parts, instead of just going for what's cheapest or off of eBay, I would never buy anything off of eBay that I was going to resell, unless it was something new from Newegg or something. Sometimes Newegg has product they sell on eBay, and it comes from Newegg in a Newegg box. But I would not put my name behind something where the source of the product is questionable. That includes used products. Again, if I don't get the support, I can't pass it on to the customer. Well, that might make my price more attractive. If it has problems, I'm stuck, even to the point of having to replace the entire unit at my cost in order to honor the warranty. If I don't do that, then the customer can come after me legally and at the same time badmouth me. And most of my business comes from referrals. So the only way you're going to get those referrals is you're meeting your customers' expectations. So these are all things that I consider when I'm building, not only for my clients, but for myself. And I strongly recommend you guys do the same. It will save you money in the long run. You might think, well, I could get this part cheaper, but at the same time, without the peace of mind and support behind it, it may actually end up costing you a lot more. And again, if you run that at scale and you do that with 10 parts, 20 parts, 100 parts, it wouldn't take much to go out of business. So it looks good at first when you get the sale, but then when the problems start coming in, yeah, you're not going to be liking life. All right, let's see. Oystein joining us all the way from Norway. Welcome in, Oystein. Roy Starman says hello. There's Les Stevenson and Essential Working Too Hard. There's our friend Frankie B joining us in the chat room. And Mortant 1210 saying hello. Robert McCord Magumi says hello. Welcome in, Robert. Again, if you have any questions during this broadcast, be sure and just type your question. Off topic is fine, into the chat, and then watch the chat for responses. I may not necessarily be able to get to your questions, but the chat room definitely will. And they're a very trusting source of information. They just want to help. So, be sure and ask your question during the live broadcast, not after it, during the live broadcast. If you've missed this live broadcast and you're catching the replay, come join us every Friday. We're here at 1 o'clock Phoenix time. It's 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And you don't need notifications. You just know every Friday at 1 o'clock Phoenix time, I am here. The live chat is happening. So just wait for your next opportunity if you want that kind of support here. The community is more than happy to help you. And of course, if I see your question, I'll do my best to answer it if I know the answer, or to point you in a direction of where I think you can find the answer. Planet Cryos with a $5 super chat. said, I almost got the EK all-in-one before I wanted my system to be mostly all Lee and Lee. Great cooler it is. Did you just become Yoda? Yeah, well, that makes sense if you want everything to be the same manufacturer for the aesthetic and everything fitting well. I could totally get that. See some people talking about using VIP CDK deals and nothing but kudos. Andy Windridge says, hello all from the Netherlands, especially Mike Dane. Welcome back. Right on. Well, thanks, Andy. Thanks for joining us. All right, PSC Computers Missouri with a $5 super chat. Thank you, PSC Computers Missouri, for your super chat support. Dorado Systems with $24.99 RON, Romanian RON. Forget what RON is. Dorado Systems says, hello, Carey, all the best from Bucharest. Right on. Well, thank you, Dorado Systems, and thank you for supporting the channel. I got to look that up. I can never remember this currency. Romanian leu? Romanian lei? Romanian lei? Well, I got the Romanian part right. All right. Well, thank you for supporting the channel. I love that we have viewers all over the world, from Romania, Switzerland, Sweden, Norway, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan. And yeah, if you want to shout out where you're watching from, put that in the chat room. It's always a thrill to see how many people are watching live around the world. It's pretty darn cool. This would have cost like $85 a minute back in 1985. And the quality wouldn't have been anywhere near this good. Dan Nilsson says he's watching us from Sweden. Mark Baggett is from watching from Massachusetts. Rick Lakes from Minnesota. Oystein from Norway. Ryan Onefull from Hamilton, Ontario. Or as we say here, the Hammer. Ben Laird is watching from Scotland. Paul O'Brien from Ireland. Ron McCure is joining us from Liverpool in England. Eddie Casanova is in Philadelphia. Bryce Hosking is in New Zealand. Scott Cowell is in Scotland. John Williams is in Madison, Wisconsin. Gerhard Huff is in Germany. Matthew Burton is in Massachusetts. William Lynn is in Cupertino, California, the home of Apple. Douglas Burchell joins us from Oakland, California. Thomas Backenstows, hello from Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. Jim KJ3N says, East Coast USA, where most people live. Most Americans live. 2/3 of the American population live on the eastern side of the country. I guess that makes sense because that was the first side, right? Those states are there the longest. Let's see. Michael Dane, the man, says, I'm back and here to stay and get back to help fixed income people with their computer needs after the new year. Right on. There he is. There's the man. Matt Zoloff says, Carey, I am here too. Right on. Hey, Matt Zoloff. Good to see you, my friend. John Paul Bacon says hello. Tim Teal says hello from Idaho. Anna Linda says at Casa Grande, Arizona. Rasoon Sharesh is joining us from London in the UK. Marine Raptor says Alberta. I don't know what Alberta. Does he mean Alberta, Canada? Rice Star Man's in New Mexico, and Thomas Mac T is in Florida. Tom Jackson's in Denver, and Gameverse is in Sweden. Charles Eslick's joining us in Northern California. Martin Wolfert's in the Asheville area of North Carolina. Wayne Bennett is in Nova Scotia in Canada. Keith Landers joins us from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Paul Connolly from Sydney, Australia. Sean Ballard says, greetings from Chicago with a warm 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Building my kid a Xeon workstation. She likes to study sewing patterns. Happy holidays and all that mad genius. Right on. Thank you. Let's see. Ryan Wonful says half the Canadian population lives in southern Ontario, I heard. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Poorly Boy says hello from Derbyshire in England. Sean Flynn joins us from Tucson, Arizona. Jeremy joins us from Denver, Colorado. Richard Cook from North Carolina. 55 Sting Dude from Southwest Oklahoma. Ron Barnes joins us from Ohio. All right. Literally a worldwide audience. Got just a little bit of everything, a little bit of everybody from a little bit of everywhere. That's pretty darn awesome, if you ask me. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the tape or the cellophane still wrapped in plastic. I've not opened this at all. I have no experience with this manufacturer, so this should be interesting. Ian Gooch with a 10-pound contribution says, hello, Carey, and greetings from London. Hey, thank you, Ian. Cheers, my friend, and thank you for the contribution. Let me clear some space because I need to put the case up here. So I guess it'll be time to get the Lazy Susan out. And the H7. Again, it's a blackout. We're not going to do any RGB. So this side panel, even though it's glass, because it's so darkly tinted, as long as there's no RGB going on inside, this may, at a casual glance, just appear to be a solid panel, depending on how it's placed. But that's the H7. Again, one of my favorite cases to work on. And they don't pay me to say that because that's not an option. Bear with me here just a second. Okay. Move this over here. And, oh, I have landscapers coming today. And you know, the landscapers, they could have showed up Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday with no recording happening here. They could have shown up before the show started today. No, it's almost like they know. So bear with me for just 1 second, because I want to make sure the windows are closed here. I don't need to hear the gardening tools blasting in the background. So bear with me here for just a second. Okay, sorry about that. I had a feeling. A lot of times they're here early in the morning. And, you know, we do these shows live, unscripted, unrehearsed, all in one take. And as a result, sometimes we get deliveries, sometimes we get other interruptions to the broadcast, and I apologize, but that does ensure that everything you're watching is genuine and real. This is not simulated in any way. This is real life. And this is what it's like running the computer repair store. Quite honestly, it's like you get interrupted by customers constantly when you're trying to help customers. Darn customers keep getting in the way, getting work done. Of course, I kid. Thank goodness for the customers, or there wouldn't be much of a business to be showing you. Okay, so let me turn my alarm off on my phone. Oh, I see our friend Kelly Stewart messaged me. Kelly says, I just want to let you know I'm still around. I hope you're doing well. I'll try to watch your Friday show tonight. Right on. Well, thanks, Kelly. I hope you'll tune in and watch. And hopefully he's not getting too much of that rain up there in Northern California. And let's see what else we're missing. Frankie B with a $200 Amazon gift card. That's very generous, Frankie. Thank you so, so much. All right. That is awesome. Your contributions are what keep this channel moving forward with all new content. And the type of content that I make, the equipment that I'm using is what's within budget and how much I can stretch out. You know, if I've got a little pile of money, I can use that to buy maybe one thing that's expensive or 5 or 6 things that are a bit cheaper and make, you know, one video versus 5 or 6 videos. And that's something I have to determine as we move from project to project here, which again, wouldn't be possible without your contributions. And yeah, I need to turn this alarm off because it's going to drive me crazy. So let me go to that button right there, I think should do it. Okay. Yeah, so when the landscapers are here, all the cameras go off like crazy because they're walking all around the yard. And so the phone starts beeping, and I have it so that if there's any movement around the building, even though the phone is normally put in a do not disturb mode, that can break through do not disturb because it's pretty important for me to know somebody's hanging around or if I've got a delivery coming, et cetera, et cetera. So when the landscapers show up, all the cameras start wigging out. So that should take care of that while they're here. And we'll do our best when they get to this side of the building. It might get a little loud, but we'll deal with it. Okay, so to prep the case, let's see. We're going to start with taking the panels off, which I don't think we've got any screws. I think you just push outwards on the glass. I think. Yep. And then what do we do? Does it go up or does it go? Goes up. So the top snaps in and the bottom has a little track it sits on. So when we put this back on, we'll set it back in the track, then lift it forward and it snaps into place that way. It's been a while since I worked on the H7 and I couldn't remember. You definitely don't want to pull it away when it needs to be pulled up, or you can bend and possibly break off the little nubs that align it with these mounting holes down here. And then we do the same thing over on this side. You'll see there's a little pull handle here. We pull that away, and this side should come off exactly the same way, where the top unsnaps just by pulling it away. Shouldn't be this difficult. It's got me a little worried. I'm assuming it's tight because it's new. There's a certain amount of force that if exceeded makes me a little nervous. But again, I think it's just because it's new, everything's really tight. So with that separated, then we can lift up and there we go. So you'll see that side is solid. It's the only, just the other side that's glass which is pretty common. Most cases don't have glass on both sides because there's really nothing to see on the other side. This is where all your cabling is going to go. And I have seen cases where they put glass on both sides, and it makes the case really heavy. And I've even seen where they paint the glass black on this side, so you can't see in. So now you've just added a fragile panel that adds a lot of weight. That would have been much cheaper to use a metal panel, and it would have been lighter and no harm in worrying about, cracking it. So that makes no sense to me when case manufacturers do that. However, some people like that, so to each their own. This is our documentation that comes with the case. And then down here, this right here, this box contains all of the screws and mounting hardware to put the motherboard and parts into this case. Every case comes with its own mounting hardware because every case has different options for mounting different hardware. Right? Some may allow for several 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch drive installations, and others may allow for 0. And the screws they use may vary. Well, the drives themselves all use the same screw, obviously. The drive cages, rails, motherboard standoffs, all of that will differ depending on the case manufacturer. The reason I mention this is you're going to want to hold on to all the extra screws, because if you ever want to do work inside of this computer case in the future, it's not like you're just going to run over to your local Home Depot and buy these little tiny screws. They can be quite difficult to find. We've got a couple of 2.5-inch drive bays here, and it looks like these you would attach your 2.5-inch mechanical or solid state drive, your SATA drives, onto these little plastic carriers. And then the carrier will slip into this holder and lock in. You've got a space for 2 of them. And then down here, you've got a space for 2 3.5-inch drives in this cage down at the bottom. One of the reasons I picked this case was, as I mentioned earlier, it's big. And I want to make sure that I'm not going to have any issues putting this giant cooler inside. Now, this isn't the biggest cooler. They do sell a cooler that's a 420 millimeter. This is a 360. So this is just a shade from being the largest we could buy. I don't know if this would fit a 420. I think it will. And it looks like there's really no mounting for the cooler up on top. I thought there was. Oh yeah, there is. The reason I don't see it is the top lifts off. Way or another. There it goes. This pops up. Okay, and then that, tell you what, we'll set that over here for now. That reveals up on the top this filter. Now understand that we're only filtering air that goes into the computer. So if our fans are pushing air out, if we've got our radiator mounted up here and our fans blowing air out the top, you want to leave this off. On the other hand, if you're going to be pulling air in, if we have our fans facing the opposite way, so that typically we don't do it that way, at least I don't. If the fans are reversed, and so the fans are effectively going to be, obviously there's no room for fans to be mounted up here. They'd have to be mounted under the radiator. And typically we want to blow the air out. If we want to pull air in, then you would want to put this piece back on and filter the incoming air. So the other consideration that we have with this case is we don't have to put the radiator on top. We can put the radiator right up here up front. We have this big area here. In fact, we could use both. We could put a radiator on our graphics card and a radiator on our cooler and run 2 separate water cooling systems if we wanted to, or build our own custom loop, et cetera, et cetera. This case is big and it offers a lot of options in that regard. So if we wanted to put the radiator up front vertically, that's an option. My preference is to go on top. Either way, it's probably 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I don't think it's going to make much difference in performance. And in either case, when it comes to mounting the radiator up front, I would be drawing air in and pushing it through the radiator this way. So if you notice the way this fan is installed right here, I don't know how well you can see that. That is an intake fan. It's bringing air in from the front of the case and blowing it into the case. And then this fan is pointing the air in the same direction. So all the airflow is moving from front to back. That's how it should be. The only way to improve that would be bring the air in down below, down here, and then have it move across the case and exhaust up through the top. So it kind of makes an S shape. You want all your air moving all together. You don't want air buffeting against each other, or you end up with dead spots where you're not going to get much cooling. It's not efficient. So we could go either way. As I mentioned, we can mount the radiator on top, or we can mount the radiator up front. Out of curiosity, which would you guys prefer? Do you think it'll look better with the radiator up front? Let me take the front off. There's a pull handle right up here. Okay. This obviously takes some muscle. Okay, that's not supposed to swing open like a door. There it is. You can see the little metal nubs that lock in, almost like a old school cabinet door. And when I turn this around, you'll see the depth that we have to place a radiator and fans in there. Again, one of the reasons I like NZXT so much is the consideration they give to the builder. Some builds are just interested in getting the lowest price and doing everything as cheaply as possible. And it can be a complete nightmare to work on. NZXT even gives us cable management tracks back here, which make cable managing an NZXT computer a pleasure. I don't despise cable managing on an NZXT case. It's quite satisfying. You'll see the computer case came with two fans, one up front, one out in the back, both facing the same direction. This fan is bringing air in. This fan is blowing air out. And you can see the direction of the airflow. And if we want to put our radiator up top, we don't necessarily need to keep this rear fan. Probably won't hurt to have it, but it probably won't help to have it either. So we could take the rear fan and move it to the front, but unless we're cooling a GPU in here, that's probably pointless as well. So I'll leave that to you guys to decide how you want to handle that. If you decide to get a case like this, just so you know what your options are and to choose what's right for you. Bikeman says, I think based on watching this video so far, I might invest in an NZXT case if it would be suitable for a micro ATX motherboard. This case will hold a micro ATX or mini ITX motherboard. They're just going to look a little silly being so small with that glass panel. You're going to look in there and see that it's relatively empty inside. They do sell micro ATX cases that look exactly like this, just smaller. The H5 and 510, I think, are full size. The H5, I think, is full ATX, and the 510, I think, is micro ATX. So it's going to be a bit smaller. If it is a bit smaller, do know that it's not quite as easy to work within because it's a smaller space to work in, but it's not that much smaller. But sometimes that little difference can be all the difference in the world, especially when it comes to cooling. When you're in a smaller space, cooling becomes potentially more of an issue. So if we have a larger case and we're only using like a small motherboard in it, and we have really good airflow and it's super easy to get in there and work on it, even though it might look a little silly, that's the downside of having the glass panel in that situation, right? If you had a solid panel, no one would look in, no one would know. All food for thought to your own personal preferences, but certainly things worth considering. Slappy says he prefers mounting the all-in-one radiators at the top. That's my thing too. Matthew Burton said I would mount in the front for a push-pull configuration. You certainly could do that. And in most cases, I would say that's probably not going to help. The difference in temperature between a push or a pull or a combination. In other words, sandwiching fans on both sides of the radiator, where the fan in front is pulling air in and the fan in the back is also pulling air in. So again, all the fans are moving in the same direction and pulling the air through the, pushing the air and pulling the air through the radiator might result in a couple degree difference on a super hot chip. It just turns out we have a super hot chip where that may actually be beneficial, but we'll wait and see. I wouldn't do it until I've decided if I need to. I wouldn't just spend money on fans and do all that extra cable management when it would potentially be completely unnecessary, a waste of money and a waste of time. Fans are going to be one of the components that are going to fail first, statistically speaking. Anything that has a moving part is likely going to fail long before anything's solid state. So by adding more fans, you're adding more noise, you're bringing in more dust, and you're spending more money, and the difference in cooling may be inconsequential, maybe negligible, where all that time and effort spent resulted in a zero performance difference. So I would do the 3 fans, and if they're not, if this cooler's not doing as good of a job as I think it should be doing, if I'm still running into situations where the chip is potentially overheating under a high stress workload, then I would certainly consider trying a push-pull configuration to see if that cuts it. But it would be a chip of this nature, this high-end chip, high voltage, runs hot, flagship performance chip. It's sort of like trying to get good gas mileage out of a hot rod, out of a sports car. Landscapers are here. Let me mute this for a second, and I'm going to start putting the motherboard into the case. Okay, so this motherboard has an extra mounting point right there. Usually on these full-size ATX boards, you'll have 3 mounting points: top, middle, bottom, and then again in the middle, top, middle, bottom, and then on the far right side, top, middle, bottom. On some boards, they'll add this additional hole. Now these 2 are usually only used on micro ATX builds where the board doesn't go down this far. where you don't have that third mounting hole. So on this side, we're actually going to have 4, and that breaks away from the standard. So the way the case comes shipped, it's already got the standoffs in position, the 9 standard standoffs, 3, 3, and 3. So I just added the 4th one. They've given us 1 extra, along with this little socket that I don't use. That goes over the standoff, and then you can use a Phillips screwdriver to tighten it, which is way better than using pliers, which scratches it all up. Not that anybody's going to see it, but OCD, what do you want? All right, so let me set this in here now. Hoping that worst of the noise is behind us, but we still might be in for some surprises yet today. Now, this is the first motherboard that I've seen that's Wi-Fi 7. So that'll be very interesting to see what our connection speeds are to the Wi-Fi 7 router, which I got back in what, February, March? And I've not been able to hook anything up via Wi-Fi 7 because I think we had one mini PC that came with Wi-Fi 7. I think. I can't remember which one it is now. And I never did get around to testing the performance on it. So in the rest of the bags, we have screws for mounting a power supply, which we're not going to use because the power supply will come with its own screws, and they're the same screws. We've got a couple of M3 5mm screws. These are used for your 2.5-inch hard drives, solid state drives. These are KB5 by 10mm. These are your standard fan screws. So if we wanted to add fans across the top, across the front, they give you a lot of screws for that, since each fan would require 4 screws. Did it say how many screws they've given us? Looks like enough. It looks like about 16 screws enough for 4 fans. And then these standard screws, these are 6/32 by 5mm. These are the ones that we'll use to secure the board down. I have this magnet that helps keep the screws onto the end of the screwdriver, and it's grabbing onto the side of the case. That's a unique problem with this case design. I don't normally have that issue. And of course, I can temporarily remove that anyway. It'll stay magnetized. It's just not quite as strong. But as I'm getting close to this edge of the case, it's pulling the driver. It's a strong magnet. So remember, I'm going for a blackout. Okay, so when I lift this up, you'll see why I went with the black RAM and why I went with this specific motherboard. You look at the color of the board and the way it's designed. It is ideal for a blackout case, as you can soon see for yourself. Now, keeping in mind that big silver thing is our CPU, which we're going to have covered up with the water block. So it'll all be black. I like to hold on to the Ziploc bags from other PC case manufacturers that are including their screws, because when I have to cut these bags open, there's no way for me to reseal them. And then they'll just run loose in the box. And then it's like, well, how many do I have left? You have to dig around and the screws will get in the manuals and such. You got to shake things to figure out where all the screws went. So if I can keep these screws segregated in their own bag that's resealable, it solves that frustration for later on if we need these screws. These are the same screws that would be used on 3.5-inch drive installs. At least with this case. Again, different case manufacturers may use different screws. Or at least the motherboard mounting part. They will all use essentially the same screws for 3.5-inch drive installs, unless they have special rails, in which case they may have special screws with shoulders on them. The rest of these screws we won't need, and so I'll just put those aside, but they'll go into this motherboard box along with any documentation or spare parts throughout this build. You'll also see our back I/O shield, how that's blacked out. Another nice touch, not that anybody's looking at the back, but it keeps my OCD happy. What can I tell you? Okay, so with the motherboard mounted, I think putting the radiator in next would be a good place to go. So let me move this box over here. This is the problem with a small workbench. I'm constantly having to clear some space. And as the parts get bigger and bigger, the space I have gets smaller and smaller. Davis Parsons said, if anybody gets this NZXT H7, a word of warning that you cannot get the front cover on. I think he means the side panel. If you have an RTX 4090, unless you have a 90-degree power connector, I guess the power connector sticks out too far. Interesting. I mean, I'd love to have that problem of having a 4090. Saw those were on sale at, what's it called? Navy Express for $1,599. Limit one per household. Who's got that kind of money to pay for a graphics card? Not me. Construction said, I've heard people say there's less stress on the pump being mounted on the top, with sort of a gravity pull helping. Yeah, these are all theorists. There's no real science behind what they're saying. And these pumps, they don't last forever. Eventually the pump dies, or the liquid inside evaporates, or it becomes gummy and it doesn't flow well, or there's some corrosion that builds up. So I don't think you're buying enough time, if that were true, that it really changes the lifespan of the pump regardless. One way or another, you'll be changing that pump out an average within 3 to 5 years. 5 years is taking it pretty far. Now, just because your pump is working doesn't necessarily mean, if it's an all-in-one pump, it's actually got any fluid left in it, or that it doesn't have a massive evaporation where there's, fluid in it, but it's not filled anymore. It's not filled all the way up. Or you also don't know if there's corrosion in the pump. So, ignorance is bliss, with the assumption that it's working. If you're never pressing the CPU hard, then the pump's, probably doing all it needs to do. It's not working that hard. So just because you're not having an overheating problem doesn't mean your pump is automatically working. Or even if the pump is working, it doesn't mean that the fluid is flowing. So I would become concerned about that after 3 years. It's definitely worth looking into. If you're a heavy, intense PC user, the problem will be pretty obvious when it happens. But if you're a regular PC user and you've just overblown, and overspent for overkill parts, may not be much difference. In other words, does it matter if your pump isn't pumping adequately because of the loss of coolant or the pump failing or the built-in, the corrosion that builds up over time? Does it matter if you're not working the system that hard? No, technically it doesn't matter. But then at that point, you didn't need to buy that expensive cooler. You could have gone with an air cooler. So, maybe you did it for aesthetics, or maybe you did it because you watched some YouTuber and thought, well, I got to have that. But the fact is, you may not need it. So it all depends on which chip you've got and how you use it. But regardless of that, regardless of how you mount it, the lifespan stays the same. I've not seen any proven evidence to suggest otherwise. And being in the business, I've changed out liquid coolers mounted in the front, mounted on the top, mounted in the back, mounted on the bottom. I don't notice any difference in their ability to cool or the longevity. It's mostly a cable management and aesthetic concern. That's my opinion. Okay, here we go. Well, look at that. It says welcome. How polite. Okay, we've got some documentation. Wow, is this so thick? Well, now I know why this was so expensive. That is a heck of an installation manual. Holy cow. Seems a bit overkill for a liquid cooler. Got this piece here, which I'll just put over there. And then inside, we've got our 3 fans, our radiator, and our water block. This already has the fluid in it. It's all sealed at the factory. There's nothing for you to do but to install it. When it dries up or gets corroded on the inside, or the pump fails, you just replace it. There's no repairing these. So these are a temporary cooling solution. Now in here, oh, that's a hefty box. I gotta say, I feel like this just came from Beverly Hills. This is the fanciest packaging of any liquid cooler I've ever seen. Look at this. Would you look at that? Bring this up to the camera. How impressive is this? How happy is my OCD right now, where everything's got its own little spot? Different standoffs, thumb screws, thermal compound. Looks like some kind of screwdriver here. More screws. This has got to be the back plate of our power cable here. Wow, that is super nice. Oh, I am impressed. Normally when we open these coolers up, they're in like an egg carton. They all are kind of the same. Even the expensive ones like the NZXT Kraken back here are pretty much all packaged the same. They really put an effort into the unboxing experience here. I can't say that's money well spent because you're going to unbox it You're never going to unbox it a second time. So to just have this moment, this experience, you're paying for that. For something that's different, I appreciate it. But if I were building these on scale and I had to go through this with every one, I guess it's not too terrible, but it's just different. Now look at the size of this radiator we've got here. There's our radiator and our pump. That will go up here. Now I'm going to set it on top, but we're actually going to mount it from the bottom. But I just want to get this out of the way because I don't have much room on the bench. So we'll just get that up there. And then we've got our 3 fans. Well, these have a very unique connector on them. I'm not sure I like that proprietary connector. That does not make me happy. This is like a bizarre 8-pin. I don't know why it's got 8 pins on it. It feels very heavy duty, but I'm a little puzzled why we're going with a non-industry standard power connector. Because that means that when these fans, not if, when these fans go out, then you're going to have to buy a fan with that same connector. It looks like the fans plug into one another, which could make the cable management a lot easier. Although I like Leon Lee's fans that click into each other. In fact, we demonstrated that here with the, what was the name of that cooler? The one from AliExpress. That's kind of the new thing where the fans lock into each other. And as they lock in, there's contacts where basically the one on the end, the fan on the end, has a power cable. And then the rest of the fans that connect to each other then share that power through a connector that makes contact when the fans are locked in together. That makes the install a lot easier, makes the cable management a lot easier. So when we go to a proprietary power connector like this, it just becomes more of a difficult thing to support because it means I can't just change these fans out with any fans. Or to do so, they're all going to run at different speeds, right? You want to have the same make and model of fan in order to get the same rotational speed going through the radiator for consistency, to have any sort of attempt at controlling your temps. So let me get this giant box out of the way. Wow, that is a monster. So this is a 360 millimeter radiator. So it's 360 millimeters long. And the way we get there is each one of these fans is 120 millimeters. So when you put 2 120 millimeter fans together, that's now 240 millimeters in total length. And they do sell radiators that are 120, 240. And then if we add our third one, $360. Now there are also 140 millimeter fans. So there'll be a 140 millimeter radiator, a 280 millimeter radiator, and a 420 millimeter radiator, using the larger 140 millimeter fans. So that radiator will be a bit wider, just as long, actually, a little bit longer. And it looks like we're at our maximum. Now that I've placed this up here, a 420 would be too big. Certainly appears that the 360 is the maximum length. There's no room to even go, not even a centimeter more on one side or the other. So a 240 would fit in there quite comfortably. Now with regards to the front, could we fit a 420 in the front? That actually looks doable. So vertically, I think a 420 will fit. I'm sure the documentation or the website for the NZXT H7 will identify which coolers it's compatible with, what size coolers. So maybe something you want to look into. Okay, so take this back out of here now that I have some room on the bench. and it's got some plastic all around it. We want to peel this plastic off. It's just there to keep the unit from getting scratched up in shipping. Keeping the plastic on is never a good idea. You might think you're keeping the unit clean, but in many cases, this plastic will yellow and bubble within a matter of weeks, and it looks terrible. And in some cases, it can impede the cooling ability, especially when it's on a heat sink. So again, this stuff is just there to protect it in shipping, much like if you've ever seen a brand new car being shipped. You'll notice they've got plastic wrapped across typically the front fenders. They want to make sure that as the car is getting transported, that any rocks that might get kicked up from the road or whatever don't damage the paint on a brand new car. We've got more plastic here on the block and more plastic on the block. Now, what's interesting is not only did they give us that tube of thermal compound, it appears we already have thermal compound applied on the bottom of the block, and we don't even need the extra thermal compound. That is a nice touch. All too often, I see cooler manufacturers being really stingy with the thermal material, which makes no sense to me because it's very inexpensive to include the thermal material with the purchase of what is often an expensive cooler. So why would they cheap out on something that doesn't cost them that much? And then it kind of leaves it to the end user to have to go and buy more thermal compound potentially when the manufacturer doesn't give them enough to fix a mistake. So it certainly seems that EK has done a great job here in the packaging and in providing, incredible documentation. We still have one more piece of plastic here on the front. I might just become an EK block fan after this. We're off to a very promising start here. I was disappointed that, unlike other items at Amazon, I could not get this in 2 days. It was going to take, I think it took 9 or 10 days from the time I ordered it. Whoa, what is this? Huh. That's weird. It's just a magnetic top that goes on there, which I guess you can rotate around. Okay. Again, nice consideration, nice touch. So, when we go to mount this cooler, if we mount it on top, that means I want the fan power cables to come out this side. And I also want the fans to blow air out the top. Now, the problem with a top-mounted radiator is the customer needs to be aware that if they put anything on top of the computer, they are potentially going to block that radiator and cause their computer to overheat. And if they've left the room, like if they set a bunch of books up here and they're completely blocking the airflow, and then they've left the computer on, they leave the room and they come back, I don't know, hours later, it's possible the machine could have overheated in that time and shut itself off. It shouldn't cause any damage, but it could. So one downside about putting your radiator on top is to remember to keep anything off the top of the computer that would otherwise block the airflow. So with that consideration, putting the radiator up front might make more sense in that we won't have to worry about that scenario. Decisions. So what we would do here is we would take this fan out, and that would just be an extra fan. We wouldn't use this fan. And these fans would mount in on this side with the radiator on the other side, and we would just use one screw then. Well, 4 screws for each fan. But instead of mounting 8 screws or however many it is, 2, 6, 10, 12 screws across the front. So if we were to, in other words, if I were to put this radiator on top, I'd have to use really short screws to mount the radiator to the case. And then I'd use the long fan screws to mount the fans to the bottom of the radiator. So we would have screws on both sides for a total of 32 screws. On the other hand, if we mount it in the front, then we're only using one set of screws that will both hold the fan on to the radiator and hold the radiator onto the case, all with the same screws. A little more efficient in that design. The more I'm speaking out loud, the more I'm talking myself into perhaps mounting this radiator up front for those reasons. I have been guilty of setting things up on top of the case and not realizing I'm blocking a radiator. If the case had a slanted top where, if you put anything on it, it would slide off, that'd be a different story. But with the case being completely flat on top, it's very inviting to use it to set stuff. I do it all the time. Like if I put the motherboard box up there to keep it together, I'm effectively blocking the airflow. And it doesn't matter if that airflow is pushing or pulling, it's blocked either way. And it will very much impede the ability of that radiator to cool. So I think we're going to go with the front mount. Okay, so to do this, let's move this aside. Gotta take this fan out first. How the heck have they mounted this fan? Oh. So this fan, and in many cases, not all, depends on the case design, these fans use the short fan screw, and the screw goes from the inside towards the outside. But when we change these fans out, we're going to be going the opposite way. As I mentioned, we're going to be running these longer screws to go through the fan housing, through this metal support bracket, and then into the radiator, all with one screw. Except it's not just one screw, there's 4 per fan. But they'll all do exactly the same thing. It's going to be very securely held in position here. There are some things that don't become apparent to me until I have a machine in front of me. Sometimes people are asking for help. They're often not descriptive. Often they're not descriptive enough for me to help them because they're not seeing something. And if they're not seeing it, they can't describe it to me, right? They don't know that they're missing critical information. So when I have a machine in front of me, I can often see things the customer either isn't seeing, they're seeing past it, or they don't know that it's significant. And if they don't share that information with me, it can make trying to help them remotely very, very difficult. So when I have a machine in front of me, like in this case here, my initial thought was to put the radiator on top. But as I'm looking at it and I'm seeing how it's all going to fit together, I've changed my mind and decided that putting the radiator in front would make far more sense. And again, that may not be a conclusion I would come to if you were emailing me, asking me my advice. It's something that once I have it in front of me, it becomes very obvious. Okay, so if we place the radiator, see how we're going to do this, in here like this. Oh no, 360 is it here as well. This would not fit a, no, I don't think this would fit a 420. Again, I'm sure in the specifications of the H7, it will tell us what size radiator it supports. In fact, I've got the documentation right here. I could just look. 360 looks pretty much Hard to say. I'm not sure how much longer the 420 is. It's possible that a 420 could fit up front, but it would be an awfully tight fit. It shows 480 millimeters from front to back in case length, 230 millimeters case width, and 505 millimeters case height. Richard Palmentier with a $5 super chat said, "Here's my late fee." Thank you, Richard. So just a lot of the same information in different languages here. I could probably find this information much quicker if I went to the website. Okay, here it is. It will support a 420 millimeter up front, but not on top. If you look at this diagram right here, well, that picture looks terrible. You'll see it shows the 3 140s fitting across the front and only 2 140s across the top. 3 120s across the top or 3 120s across the front. And a 120 or 140 in the back. So yeah, there you go. Answers that question. Shane Schellenberger says, "Wow, this baby will be hovering about the room before this live cast is over." Well, I think we'd have to add a few more fans for that. Steve in the chat wants to know if he can change a CPU without having to reinstall Windows. Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, if all you're doing is changing a CPU, even the Windows activation shouldn't change because that's tied to the motherboard. If you're not changing the motherboard, then you're not changing obviously the drive controller. Yeah, it should be a painless upgrade. Okay, let's see what our documentation says, even though I don't think I need to read it. We've got two different back plates, one for Intel's 115X and socket 1200, and one for Intel's socket 1700, which is what we're using here today. Then there's an Intel mounting bracket and an AMD mounting bracket, a tube of thermal paste, a mounting screw tool. That was that weird piece here that I was pointing out. I thought was a screwdriver. The heck? It's just like a little pipe. And I guess this is for the standoffs. So when you put the standoffs in, or not. Oh yeah, there it goes. Clever. All right, so we're going to have a lot of screws. As I mentioned, we're putting screws on the front and on the back, like in a push-pull configuration. You'll need 16 screws for each side for a total of 32. And it looks like they've given us one bag of 16 long screws and 16 short screws. and in another matching bag of 16 long screws and 16 short screws. The difference, however, is these long screws in this bag are threaded from front to bottom, top to bottom, and the screws here in this bag have a long shoulder on them. Let me bring this up to the camera and I can show you. I'm not quite sure why you would use these screws here that are threaded from top to bottom. That seems, I don't know, unwise. Just that you could go into deep into the radiator versus these screws here that have a long shoulder and are just threaded at the end, which to me is much safer on the radiator. So I'll be using this bag, not this bag. However, I might take a quick look at the documentation, since this is unlike any other liquid cooler I've installed. I've not seen one that comes with these two different types of long screws. It's very bizarre. Phillips head screw, UNC 6/32 by 34 millimeters. And the other is slightly shorter. It's 6/32 by 30 millimeters. So it's not, the screws that have the shoulder on them are slightly shorter in length. Interesting. So it goes about installing the back plate and prepping the water block, which I'm not really, I don't want to do it in that order. I want to attach the radiator and fans first. So we're going to skip ahead. And I'm immediately into another language. So, wow, Spanish, French, Japanese, Polish, Russian. ZH. What is ZH? I don't know. Looks like Chinese. All right, well, I guess the only pages of this instruction manual that are in English is right here. So out of this whole booklet that they're including, the only part of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 pages, double-sided, it's 12 pages total. Huh. I'm just curious if it identifies how we know which screws to use. So they're talking about using the screws with the shoulders when installing the fans to the radiator, which is my preference. But at what point would you use those other long screws? Where would that be acceptable or necessary? It also looks like a mounting bracket goes onto the bottom of the water block and it will secure on with screws as well. Yeah, I do not see an example of where those longer screws would be used. So these are the AMD instructions, AMD mounting. And I have yet to see them show the full length, fully threaded long screws in use in any of these documents. So I'm not sure what they're for. I suppose if I were mounting in a push-pull configuration, I wouldn't have much choice but to use the other set of screws in that situation, because I won't have enough of the shoulder-based screws to do both sides. But we're not doing both sides at this point anyway, so it's a non-issue for us, more just a curiosity. Which will remain a curiosity for now, because I don't really want to spend more time digging into that since it's irrelevant for us on today's build. Clear this stuff out of the way here. Okay. Wow, do I make a mess or what? Okay. So this is an extra fan. I'm going to put this aside. Find another place for that to go. These fans are all the same. It doesn't matter which one we want to use first. I definitely want the spinning part of the fan. See how that center spins? On this side, the center doesn't move. This is the side the air is going to be coming out of. So we want the air to be drawn in from the front and get pushed through the radiator, and it eventually get pulled out by that rear fan, and we'll have nice airflow. Roy Starman says the long screws are for going through the case you're going to do. The extra 4mm allows for the extra length of the case. Yeah, I don't think that's necessary with this case, but we're going to find out. Then I have to think about where the cables are going to come out. So we're going to come out on this side. I've got cable management holes right through here. So we definitely want to be on the right side, my right, looking at it, facing it. Whew, I need a colder Gatorade. It's getting hot in here. Thought my voice would be better today based on how I was feeling yesterday. I'm a little sad. My optimism didn't pan out to reality, but hopefully it's not too annoying. Okay. Let's see. How do I want to do this? Definitely want to make sure that in my case, using an electric driver, you want to be careful that the material the radiator is made out of is a very soft metal. It's very easy to strip these screws out. So I will make sure that my torque setting is set way, way low. And yeah, you know what? I don't even think I'm going to use the electric driver here, only because it's going to be quite a handful to try and align everything, at least to get the first couple screws started. This is where it would help to have an extra set of hands. And these screws with the shoulders, there's not much thread on them, so they're not going to go in that far. So that's a bit of a relief when you've got 16 of them to do. I guess we've got 12, 4, 8, 12. It's the shorter screws that it doubles up in some areas, where it uses, how many did I say? 4, 5, 6. No, I guess it's 12 either way. Well, I don't have something lining up correctly here. Let's see. It's going in. You don't want to over tighten your fans. That will lead to causing the frame to warp over time, which will result in the fan failing that much sooner. So you want it to be snug, but you don't want it to be overly tight. Okay, so with the first fan on, it's holding the radiator in place for us, which now means adding the other two fans will be so much easier now that the radiator is being held in place by that first fan. These screws here are extra. I'm going to just put them in this bag for right now. Actually, no. Grab one of my Ziplocs here. Okay, so got the other two fans to add here. And each fan is going to plug in to the fan above it. With the last fan either at the top of the chain or the bottom of the chain, I don't know yet, will be the only cable we run then to power. But why there are 7 different power connectors puzzles me unless it has the ability to control each fan individually. I would think you would want all the fans spinning at the same RPM. It's not like one side of the radiator is going to get warmer and, you know, tell it which fan to speed up. That would be a pain because then you'd have to align and know which fan is at what point of the radiator, top, middle, bottom. So I'm not exactly sure why they did it that way. Engineered in Slovenia. Full pressure technology. Okay. Made in China, engineered in Slovenia. There you go. We got any folks watching from Slovenia right now? When we're getting these screws started, you don't want to tighten them down until all 4 of the screws have been started first. Because, again, you can warp the frame. And if you tighten one side down too much, it could warp the frame enough where you cannot get one of the screws to align with the mounting hole anymore. That's how much you can warp it. And believe it or not, it doesn't take that much warpage. So take your time, enjoy your build. Don't try to rush it through. Haste makes waste, as they say. And again, we just want to snug these up. We don't want to torque them down. They just want to be snug. And then we've got our power connectors here where one fan plugs into the other fan. So it's easy. Just one fan to go. And that's convenient. By lining these up this way, the female connectors hanging from the bottom with the male connector up on top. So those align perfectly. Well thought out. So there was a new documentary, kind of like a documentary dramatization with an actor playing the part of Cary Grant. Cary Grant's a little before my time. I mean, granted, the guy didn't die until the middle 80s, but 1980s. Having the name Cary, one of the ways, you know, when people hear it, they're not sure if it's Gary. So I'll say Cary, like Cary Grant. And most people, regardless of age, know who Cary Grant is. And Cary Grant is not his real name. His real name was Archibald Leach. So they called him Archie. And he's British. And Cary Grant was a character he played. So I never really knew much about him. I've seen a couple of movies that he's been in. And he kind of reminds me, or it might be more fair to say, George Clooney kind of reminds me of Cary Grant, in that he's very suave and, you know, looks like he's really got his act together and doesn't take himself too seriously. He's got a good sense of humor about himself. And all those just reminds me of George Clooney in a lot of ways. So anyway, there's this 4-part miniseries that just started airing. What was it, on BritBox? And as told by his ex-wife, Diane Cannon. So I guess it's a little biased from her perspective of things, but nonetheless, it's fair to say she knew him quite well. But if you're looking for some TV to watch, there's not a whole lot on lately. So that just started. The first 2 parts aired, and then there'll be 2 more parts, which I'm going to guess are going to air next week. Not sure what the schedule is. Okay, so that is our radiator, and you can see how everything is blacked out and how I think that looks really attractive. Now, to mount the water block, we're going to need to get back here. So I wanted to make sure when I was putting the board in that I had a big enough opening back here to do that work. Some cheaper cases and lesser known manufacturers will give you that cutout, but it'll be too small, or it'll be shifted to the left or the right, or too far up or too far down, requiring you to take the motherboard out, mount the back plate, and then put the board back in, which defeats the whole purpose of having that cutout. So not the case with the NZXT. It's, again, name brand case, and the quality is there in the ease with which it is to work on. And this is an example of that. You can buy cheaper cases made of thinner, more bendable materials that are more easily scratched, can more easily cut you with sharp edges, and then don't have the openings in the right locations to assist with the ease of installation for backplates. So this is a prime example, real world example of where your money's going when you're buying name brand versus the cheap stuff. The cheap stuff will almost always make you work harder, and will almost always cost you more in the long run for one reason or another. That's been my experience anyway. So now to mount the water block, oh, there's some tape I missed on the block. To mount the block, we're going to have to get the backplate installed. And let's see here. We're socket 1700. Oh, that's what this connector's for. Okay, so what this cable is for is we will connect this to either the top fan or the bottom fan on that proprietary connector. And then this is a standard 4-pin fan header that plugs onto the board. So even though we're powering 3 fans, we're only using 1 fan header. So then all those fans are going to run the same speed, which is what you want. Which again, doesn't make any sense to me why we're going from a 4-pin fan header into a 6-pin cable, because there is only 4 wires on this end. Actually, there's only 4 wires on this end, but when we get into the fan connector itself, the fan connectors have 6 cables. So I don't know where the other 2 cables, this one has 8 cables. Yeah, that makes no sense to me, how we're splitting 4 into 8, or why. Especially, it's 4, if you look inside the connector, there's only 4 connectors being used and the other 4 are empty. So once you plug into the fan, they're using all 8. It makes no sense. I'd have to reverse engineer the fans and figure out what they're doing. It's not hurting anything, but I just don't like the proprietary nature of those fan connectors. Okay, so when it comes to the back plate, attaching the back plate to the motherboard. So in this orange box here, we should have, oh yeah, we got a lot. We've got our bracket that goes on the bottom of the block. So one's for AMD and one's for Intel. And then we've got our back plates here. These are for Intel only. This is for socket 115X and socket 1200. This is for socket 1700. And what's great is it's stamped right on the back plate. So you're not guessing like on other cooler installs we've done where the documentation hasn't been very clear and the parts labeling hasn't been very clear. You'll see right here on the back, is it going to focus? Wow, never seen it have that hard of a time to focus before. And this one says LGA 1700. It's stamped right in there. There it goes. And this one says LGA 1200 and 115X. So because this is socket 1700, we are not using this back plate on this build. And then when it comes to the bracket, we're not using the AMD bracket, which is this funky one that's kind of got curves. See how the way it bends? And the Intel one is completely straight on the edges. So let's see. So to mount this bracket, we're going to come back here and place the bracket. You'll notice there's holes cut out in the bracket for the screw mounting points for the CPU socket itself. So that's how you're going to know you've got it in correctly or lined up correctly. And then as far as securing this now, we're going to use either these long standoffs here or these long standoffs here. They're very similar. Let me bring it up to the camera and show you close up. The primary difference between them is the size of the grip here. They're very similar. And one is used on socket 1200 at 11.5X and the other at socket 1700. They're very, very similar. Let's see which one of these do we use. The big one or the little one, I guess would be the best way to describe them. Mounting thumb screw for Intel. Well, everything has been very clear up until this point. So let's go back to the parts list and see if they're described better. Okay, so the mounting screw for LGA 1200 and 115X. Oh, they're all using the big one. This little one, this is for LGA 20XX. That's your Xeon chips. So the one that has the shallowest thumb screw is for the most expensive Intel chip. So we're going to use the large ones, the ones here up on top of this packaging. And these are going to be used on both Intel and AMD, whether it's an Intel socket, 115X, 1200, 1700, or AM4 or AM5 socket, you're going to use these larger ones, not the smaller, more narrow ones. Those are just specifically for Xeon and nothing but Xeon, or the chips, the Intel chips that have an X in the name. So the short end, if you look at these, I'll bring this up to the camera again. If you look, you've got one side that's pretty short and one side that's long. That long side is going to face up, and we're going to go through the CPU mounting hole, through the motherboard, secure onto the back plate behind the motherboard. In that direction. And it won't go in the other way. It's a completely different thread type. So if you try to put it in backwards, it won't let you. So once again, it helps to have a couple extra hands here to do this. And might be easier to lay the board down than to work on it upright like this. But when have I been known to do things the easy way? I start now. Okay, so if I spin this around, what you'll notice, and it might be hard to see because it's very dark in there, is I have started the standoffs in opposite corners. So that aligns the bracket for me. So putting in the last two will be very easy since it's already aligned. So we've got that one there. And that one in that corner there. And so putting in those last two will be super easy. Now, this add-on tool for tightening these, don't know that that's necessary. I'm going to try it just for grins and giggles, but these don't have to be that tight. But still, it's a nice thought that they've given you that tool. Just give you a little more leverage in tightening these down a little bit more. You can crush the motherboard. Motherboards are several layers of circuitry. It's not just on the top and bottom anymore. So I would not go overboard on tightening these standoffs. They should be more than snug, but again, you don't want to be crushing. So here's a little tool. If I slide that tool over this standoff, okay. It doesn't really give you that much more leverage, so it's fine. I suppose if you were to stick something in the tool, it looks like you could use this like a T-bar put something in there and then use that as leverage to torque. Don't do that. Then you would almost guaranteed over tighten these and cause potential damage to your motherboard. So I realize you can't really see what I'm doing here, but the problem is everything's very dark inside. And then once my hand goes in there, you're just going to see the top of my hand anyway. But essentially, I take this piece, slide it over the top of the standoff, and just spin it and do that. And do it in opposite corners. So go one corner, opposite corner, opposite corner, opposite corner, just to make sure that you're not warping that back plate. And as far as your fingers can tighten it, that's as far as you should take it. You should not be using any tools to tighten this down. Still, pretty neat idea. And a lot easier on the old fingertips to use this. So these other 4 standoffs, we're not going to use those. In these 2 brackets, these are for AMD and for the other Intel socket. So we're not using those. Not on this build. This piece here, this bracket, is going to affix to the bottom of our cooler. And to attach this, we have to take this cover off. And this cover is protecting our thermal compound, which again, I'm surprised they've applied thermal compound for us. Now, with regards to how this goes on, it looks like any direction. And then I've got to guess with regards to forward or backward, I've got to guess these indents are going to go towards the motherboard. But let me just see if the documentation clarifies. Use 4 M3-4 screws to install the bracket on the pump unit. Be careful not to touch or damage the pre-applied thermal compound. Okay, let's see. Use 4 M3-M3x4. Which screws are those? There's 6/32, 6/32. Mounting plate Phillips head M3x4mm. K. Oh, okay. So in this other bag with the long screws without the shoulder, it does not have 16 of these small screws. I thought this was the same thing. These screws are very similar to what's in this other bag, but there's only 4, whereas this one there's 12 or 16. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's 12, and in here there's only 4. What are you guys saying in the chat? Horton said, I'm putting that all-in-one on my list. I would get RGB fans for it. Well, there's an RGB version of it. I didn't buy the RGB version, so it would probably cost you more money to get fans separately than to just buy it as a kit. And I think their fans are designed specifically for airflow, pressure pushing through the radiator. Whereas if you're just buying generic fans, you may not get as good of air pressure out of them. So 2 reasons to, just buy it with the fans you're going to want to use rather than sourcing the fans separately. Easy Otter said, did you say BritBox? Yeah, I think it's a service called BritBox that has the show Archie on it about Cary Grant. Okay, let's see. So if I put this piece on here like this, doesn't seemingly matter what direction it goes on, except I want the curved metal facing down. And then in here, these screws are slightly different in that they've got a thicker head on them than the ones for the radiator. And these are also shallower, much shallower. 1, 2, 3. I'd have one more in here somewhere. 4. And let's see, I'm going to need a screwdriver here. I think my JIS driver is ideal for this. One there. Here. I am more than okay with this cooler installation method. It's very well thought out. I am impressed. I hope it works as good, as well thought out of a design and how it works, with at least with the thought process of how it installs. Very happy with that. Okay, so now this piece, the water block, will go right up here on top. And then in the orange box, we've got our thumb screws with springs that come out. Not accustomed to the springs being removable. So we just want to get these started. 1, 2. Yeah, you don't want to lose these springs. Nothing's holding them in. Three. Oh, that's going to look fantastic. So I have to tighten those down, but that gives you kind of an overview. It's really a blackout case, for sure. So now we want to tighten these down in opposite corners as evenly as we can to get the, most level install possible. Now these thumb screws turn quite a bit. Okay, finally, we're getting to them bottoming out. Wow. Surprised at just how much those have to be turned. And again, opposite corners, try and do them all as evenly. Doesn't have to be precise, but relatively evenly. So we're not tightening down one screw and then tightening down the others. You sort of want to tighten them down a little bit each one and going in opposite corners. That secures us right there. So all these other screws we've got left over, we're not using on this build. And then I can take, again, I'll take one of the little plastic bags here. I know what I can do. We can grab, it's got a hole in it. I think it'll be all right. Take these, put them in here. Take all these extra screws. You'll see we didn't even use that tube of thermal compound. That would only come into play if we have to take the cooler off and make changes. I think that's it, aside from plugging the water block into the motherboard fan header, and then of course the front fans need to be plugged into the fan header. I think that looks good. Now, vertical placement recommends the tubing coming out of the bottom of the radiator, not from the top. So if we look at the diagram here, it's not that it won't work the other way, but their preference, I'll show you the diagram here in the book, is for the tubes to be at the bottom. I would be a little concerned if we have enough space, if we have clearance for these tubes to come out from the bottom. To reverse this the other way means I have to pull all these fans off, flip it around the other way, and put the fans back on. So for right now, I'm going to leave it as is, and I will flip it around later. Just having done all that work, I don't want to undo it. And, that's the price I pay for not looking at the directions ahead of time. I've installed rage feeders in this orientation, both with the fans, the hoses on top and the hoses on bottom. I've not been able to tell the difference, but if they're going to recommend the hoses on the bottom, my only concern is that these hoses aren't sticking out so far as they get in the way down here of getting enough clearance. Because remember, these hoses are going to be all the way down here, way down here. So they've got to have clearance to come out through here. And, this is not an NZXT water block. So it's not like they took this case under consideration. The more I look at it, the more I think that's not going to work. It's going to bend these hoses significantly up. It's going to put a significant crease in the hoses getting through this narrow passage here. And there doesn't appear to be any way to widen that. So, probably going to leave it like this. I might turn it around just test fit it, but it looks to me like that's going to be too narrow. If it was a 240 millimeter cooler, it wouldn't be a problem. Then the hoses would be coming down here. But with the hoses coming down all the way below here, and given how stiff they are and they're not on a swivel, that's really going to pinch those cables, or those hoses, I should say. Now, we're going to need a power supply, and I wasn't quite sure what power supply to use in this build, but let me see what I've got back here. Boy, I wouldn't mind using one of those NZXT. Oh, wait a minute. I do have an NZXT power supply. What is it? Oh, it's only a C550. What's this one? It's also a C550. Kind of wanted more than 550 watts. I've got an EVGA 750. Don't think it's modular, and I was thinking of using a modular power supply for this build. What is that, a 650? I might go on Amazon and order another NZXT 750 modular. They're about $130, but they're worth every penny. I think they have a 10-year warranty. And because we're going so high end on everything else, why cheap out, on the power supply? I want this to be GPU ready if we want to add a GPU to it. So, well, a 550 watt power supply is plenty to turn the motherboard on. It'll be lacking if we're going to add a GPU. Okay, so with regards to the water block, trying to see if this motherboard has an all-in-one pump header. Yeah, it does. It's chassis fan 2/WP, which would be water pump. And that would tell us that that's going to be on full speed. Oh, I also see another one, CPU fan 2, also says water pump. And that one is much closer. Now, I'll have to do a little cable management to clean that up, obviously. But we've also got our front port umbilicals. So our power switch, reset switch, power LED, hard drive LED are all on this one connector. Something that I love NZXT does. It puts that all on one connector. And then all you have to do is push this one connector on, and there's all your switches and LEDs. Now, why other case manufacturers can't do that is a puzzle that remains and shall remain. I'm not going to hook up the front USB or the front audio at this point. I'm too anxious to want to get this fired up. So I think I'm just going to use a temporary power supply until I get that NZXT power supply ordered and delivered. This will work for now. So let's see, we'll orient it with the fan facing down. And again, this is just for today. I don't intend on keeping this power supply in here. This will get the job done. Almost Nothing 17 contributes $5 in Super Chat. Thank you, Almost Nothing. Okay, here's the screws for the power supply right here. They came with our case. As I mentioned, a new power supply will have the screws in the box with the power supply. And you can use either the screws that came with the case or the screws that come with the power supply. For this example, they're the exact same screw, the exact same color, exactly the same. But I do want to secure this power supply in here, even though it's just temporary. I don't want it to slide around in there. Good way to get stuff accidentally damaged. You're moving things around and you're like, it's just temporary. I'm not going to secure it. Then it ends up sliding into another piece of hardware that's going to give you a heart attack. And these things are so easy to take in and take out. Ain't no big deal. I'm not going to tighten the screws any further than that because it's not a permanent install. But at least it's secured. Okay, what do we have here? This is our graphics power. So I need to grab a wire tie and just clean up this cabling. It's very long. This power supply was obviously intended for a large case. So for now, I'm going to take all the power supply cables we're not using, grab one of these wire ties here, and again, just to temporarily tie them up and out of the way so they're not dragging across the bench and potentially knocking stuff over or getting tangled up in stuff. And then the last cable, there's just a couple more cables, but the last power cable is going to go up here to our EPS power connector, CPU power, right up here. Look at how open that is. What a pleasure. Like I said, working with these NZXT cases, so much less frustrating. Look at the ease with which I'm able to reach into this top. Now, granted, if the radiator and fans were there, that would obviously block some of my motion, but still relatively simple to get up into that corner. These fans need to be hooked up front, so we'll come out from the bottom. Yeah, you know what? I can come out from the top or I can come out from the bottom. Kind of feel like, which fan header do we want to use? Hey, there's Gregory Howard with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Gregory. And Victor Callender with a £2 contribution says, hey, Carey in chat, here's my late fee. Again, thank you, Victor. Thank you, Gregory. Gregory's still patiently waiting for me to finish his coffee machine build. Surprised he's not chewing me out by now. Let's see. Appreciate your patience, Gregory. So this fan, we can bring it in. So we just come in here, I suppose. Plug that in there. And then front fans for the radiator, I think will come in from the bottom. And then we'll run this cable through this management hole down here, right through the front here. And we have a fan header approximately right here. So you can see I brought that up through here and then into the fan header on the bottom of the board. So with regards to the front USB and front audio, I'm going to postpone hooking those cables up because I'm just too anxious. I want to see this, see how this block works, how it's going to cool. So after all this time and effort, let's find out if it was all worth it. Power supply on off. Power cable. HDMI port will go here. This has the built-in Wi-Fi 7. A lot of I/O in the back here. And I need my keyboard and mouse. I think we've already got, yeah, we've got the operating system installed already. So let me move this stuff over here. Keyboard and mouse. Daniel contributes $1.99 in Super Chat. Thank you, Daniel. Richard Palmentier said, I've been a member for 3 months, but my sticker says 2. Yeah, YouTube doesn't give us a sticker for every month. They give us a sticker for a new member, your first month, your second month, and then it won't change again until your 6th month. And then it'll stay saying 6 until you reach the 12th month. And it'll stay saying 12 until you reach your 24th month. And it'll stay saying 24 until you reach your 36th month. And that's as far as YouTube takes it right now. If you hover your mouse over the badge, it should actually show you the number of months, if I'm not mistaken. I think just hovering the mouse over the badge will show you the actual length. I think Michael Brown wants to know if Uncle Carey's Windows 10 optimizer works with Windows 11. Yes, I've used it and demonstrated it here on every Windows 11 installation I've been doing for the last year and a half. So I guess you haven't been watching too many shows, because I've done that a lot. I don't know how much benefit it provides, but it certainly doesn't hurt anything. And I always run it on my Windows 11 builds, as well as my Windows 10 builds. If you enjoy this content, be sure and hit the thumbs up button, and be sure and hit subscribe if you're not already subscribed, so that you can be made aware anytime new content is posted or new videos go live. And also with my public posts, so you can be alerted to that as well. All that's free, and then if you become a member, that's $9.99 a month, and that entitles you to direct contact with me if you have any problems or questions, as well as the members-only video content. We always do a members-only video every Monday at 1 o'clock Phoenix time. Currently, that's 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And sometimes throughout the week, I will do bonus members-only content. And again, members-only content remains members-only. It'll never be released to the public. It's a benefit of membership. And the members-only live videos are less crowded, so it's a lot easier to interact with me when the viewers are fewer. Okay, so the keyboard and mouse are plugged in. Well, that looks good. When I said subscribe, did the subscribe button light up? It's supposed to do that now. I don't know if anybody can confirm that for me. Ben Laird said it's 8 p.m. UK time. So 1 p.m. Phoenix is 8 p.m. in the UK. Thank you for that, Ben. All right. We ready to do this? Checking to make sure I have shouted out everybody who has so generously contributed during today's broadcast, and making sure I'm clicking the little heart icon next to each one. Lax in my duties today. Nick Caffrey contributed €15. He says, oops, I'm late again. Hey, Carey in chat, waiting for the last component of my first build. Case arrives tomorrow. Hi to Paul O'Brien, Les Stevenson, and Richard Palmentier. Right on. Well, hopefully you'll have a good build, Nick. Let us know how that goes. And thank you for supporting the channel. Okay. Douglas said, no, the subscribe button did not light up when I said to subscribe. It's supposed to. Darn YouTube. Nothing ever works. I'm not going to give YouTube a break for nothing. All right, let's see. We'll go to HDMI input. Let's turn that on. Let's take camera 1. And I minimize it just a little because I want to see what this looks like. Again, it should be blacked out. We shouldn't get any lights or anything. And it's our power button here. So I guess I need to turn power supply on, then power. There it goes. So there is some RGB on the motherboard that I will have to turn off in the BIOS. Got my cable all wrapped up here. Wasn't too smart of me. Okay, so with that, let's turn off camera 1. Oh, lucky me, updates are underway. Well, it's whisper quiet. I'm happy with the sound of the fans. I've had some liquid coolers where the fans are ridiculously loud. Okay, here we are with our Windows 11. I guess I can plug the internet into it. So let me step around and plug the Ethernet cable in. And what I'm curious about, of course, is going to be our Prime 95 results with our thrashing the CPU here, seeing how it performs heat-wise under a heavy workload for an extended period of time. Now, did I activate this? I think I activated this. Let's go down under search and type in activation. See if Windows is activated. No, I've not put a product key in here yet, so that's okay. Something more for me to do after the show. I'll buy a product key for this. I want to turn this feature on and go under advanced options and turn this on, turn this on. Notify me, we'll turn that on. And then these 3 optional updates, I want these. I don't even care what they are. Blindly select them because I consider all updates important. So unless it's like a printer driver update, those I might avoid because it can change the printer software. And then the client gets all confused and says, how do I do double-sided printing? The feature went away, and it's just that they moved it. And so other than printer driver updates, I will normally do all other driver updates and any other updates. So this is a slow internet connection. That's going to take a while, but I suppose we can torture it at the same time. So if we bring up HW monitor, start this. I should also verify it's seeing my new RAM okay. Go back to right click system. Yeah, 64 gigs, it's all there. i9-14900K. That's where all my money went. All right, let's see. Voltages, temperatures. Shouldn't be worried about the temps on the E cores. It's really the performance cores that are the ones that are going to get hot. And these temps I'm looking at right now are very impressive. The fact that we're in the 30s and not in the 40s right out of the gate is a good sign. So let's bring up Prime 95. Yeah, we'll run Prime 95 while we torture it. Download updates at the same time. Why not? And what is it, 3:39 my time? So just round it up, say 3:40. So by 4 o'clock, that'd be 20 minutes. And we'll see if this temperature gets concerning between now and 20 minutes from now. So now it's a waiting game while we're installing updates. Okay, so while we're doing this, if you have any questions, this is the time where we can interact as we wait to see the results of this test. But I am blown away by just how quiet this cooler is, and the entire installation process was a pleasure. The only concern I have are those proprietary fan connectors, which is a pretty serious concern, but these fans should be easy to replace if need be. EK is a big company, but it does kind of lock you into them. Mortant said, Carey, that's a nice build. Oh, wait till you see it when it's done. Yeah, we put the panels back on it and get the cable management all nice and clean in there, all blacked out. I forgot which SSD I used in this build. Take a quick gander here. Two terabyte what? Is it a Gen 5? Yeah, this is a T700 Gen 5 NVMe. So that's a 12,400 megabyte per second read speed. Okay, our temps have climbed quite a bit here. I'm a little concerned about that package temp, but each individual core doesn't look bad at all. Of course, we've only been running 2 minutes, so. Let me take a look in the chat and see what you guys are saying. Richard Palmentier said, I ran hardware info and my cores are running 97, 99, and 104. That's way overheating. It is way overheating. Ben Laird mentions Windows 10 support can be extended after 2025. Not for regular folks, just for large corporations that have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend for that support. That is not for regular folks. Unfortunately, you cannot purchase that. Aaron Warner says hello. Hey, welcome in, Aaron. Michael Brown said the subscribe button did light up when I mentioned subscribe. Subscribe? Subscribe. Subscribe? Subscribe. See if I can get that thing to turn into a disco ball. Mortant wants me to check my email. All right. Great idea, Mortant. Just taking a look here at our temps. Still looking really good here. 3D Everything with a $20 super chat contribution said, I love being retired, but I only took a week off to ease myself into it. I think I need more time testing this. Richard Palmentier says, do you think I need a better cooler? Well, what CPU and cooler are you using now? And Mortant sends a $100 Amazon gift card. Well, thank you very much. That's very generous. And yeah, I'll have to do shows on Fridays more often. Just got a Jimmy update over there at Studio A. He looks like he's being spoiled. Okay, well, thank you again, Mortant, and thank you as well to our good friend Frankie B. You guys rock. All right. Yeah, so after the show, I'm going to go on Amazon. I'm going to order that NZXT 750 watt power supply, fully modular. Like I say, they're about 130 bucks. I think that's going to be a beautiful fit for this case and this build. With the parts all in line, you know, high-end motherboard, high-end chip, high-end power supply, high-end RAM, high-end SSD. I'd say high-end case, but I really wouldn't consider this high-end financially, but high-end as far as build quality, ease of working on it. It's a great value for the money. So again, NZXT isn't paying me. You'd think that they are the way that I'm talking them up, but that's just truly how I feel about them. After working on so many crappy cases over the years, it's few and far between that cases come in that are a pleasure to work on. And NZXTs lately have been consistently easy to work on. Oh, we going to sleep? What's happening? Oh, I think that's installing a video driver. That's why that's blanking out. Temps are still okay. I mean, 87 isn't great. I mean, I prefer to keep it under 85, but this is a flagship chip. It's going to run hotter. So I'm going to give it another 5-degree variance. So as long as we keep it at below 90, if it gets to above 90, then I'll be concerned. But I still won't stop the test unless it exceeds 96 or 97. At that point, then it needs to be addressed. So I get a little concerned at 90. I'm still okay. If we peak out, if our maximum stays under 96, it's fine. It can be left alone. It's adequate and it'll absolutely take care of itself. It shouldn't have any overheating issues. This is a very unrealistic test to torture the CPU for this amount of time. We've been going, I think, 8 minutes. So we still have the majority of the test time remaining. It's only about 40% through this test. Richard Palmentier said he's got an i5-12400 with a stock cooler. Well, that's very unusual for a 12400 to be running that hot. It sounds like the CPU cooler is not firmly attached. So I would take the cooler off and I would inspect it to see that the thermal compound has been spread out. You can tell if it's not, if the CPU cooler is not seated flat against the top of the CPU, then you'll notice like half of the compound is untouched. And that'll be your sign that you haven't got it level. So I would take the cooler off. You know, you just twist the little tops of the towers a quarter turn and then pull them up. And then be sure and turn them back in order to lock it back down. But the quarter turn will put it in the unlock position so you can lift up on each tower. That releases the peg from the alligator's mouth, they call it, the connector at the bottom of the board, and release that. Inspect the bottom of the cooler and see that it looks like it's flat and it's, you know, touching completely. If it's not, then you know you did not have it straight. So I would do that first, because otherwise something sounds majorly wrong with your build. A 12400 should not be running that hot. And certainly not while doing something like watching YouTube. That's a relatively simple task. That would have me concerned. David Graham said that happened to me and I had to reset my cooler. Hey, it's happened to the best of us. He says all the towers clicked when I installed the cooler. That doesn't mean that they all went through though. So again, just because they clicked, that's a good sign, but it doesn't guarantee that it's sat flat. So again, the only way you're going to know is to take it off and inspect it. Clearly something isn't right. Something, if you're running those temps and you're not overclocking it, you're not overvolting it, it sounds like the cooler's not on correctly. George Frugia says, how do I send you a copy of my latest build? You can put the information here in the live chat if you like. Danielle Emberley says, I find with the pushpin coolers, you can look at the back of the motherboard and see if the pushpins went all the way through. Yeah, you'll see me doing that here all the time. I don't just trust the clicking. I visually inspect it to make sure that all four of the ends are coming out the same distance. If one of them isn't coming out as far as the other three, then your cooler's on crooked. It can be very subtle too, because they only come out a couple millimeters. Mortant said, I am liking the ASRock motherboard more and more. Yeah, well, you know, when we give these other manufacturers a chance, it's interesting, you know, as time goes by to see how they've changed their designs and their design philosophies. Sometimes they change them for the worst. Sometimes they don't change them at all. Or sometimes they change it once every 10 years. I agree. I think ASRock's moving in a very good direction here. And especially with price, they've become my Gigabyte replacement. You know, Gigabyte's very incommunicado with their customers. There's just no discussion. You don't really see Gigabyte really promoting or sponsoring many YouTube channels. They're a very difficult company to get in touch with or to have them respond to you. Now, granted, if you have a support ticket, something like that, that gets handled in a routine way. But I have to say, communication with Gigabyte has always been their worst Achilles heel of that company. So they were making good products at a good price. But if you wanted to communicate with the company, they weren't going to talk to you. That's been my experience. And it's never changed. It's always been that way. Asus is very much into the YouTube community and they sponsor a lot of videos, but they're effectively paying for people to make commercials for them. And then that's a whole nother issue. MSI does the same thing where they effectively think of a review as a commercial. And there should be no confusion. If you're getting paid, you're not doing a review, not in my opinion. And there is some concern over even getting the product for free in exchange for a review. That should also be disclosed, because when you're spending your own hard-earned money and something doesn't live up to your expectations, it's a lot easier to get pissed off than if the product was given to you and it has some shortcomings. You'd say, well, you know, you're a little more forgiving because it wasn't your money. So it does absolutely affect the review. There's no doubt about it. So MSI and ASUS like to pay for effectively commercials disguised as reviews. Gigabyte very rarely participates with anybody ever. And ASRock, I don't quite know yet what their participation level will be like, but I'm just now starting to sell ASRock boards to my customers. That's how impressed I've become with them. And I think it's been over a year since I've used a Gigabyte board. And the last ASUS board I had doesn't always turn on. It's got something wrong with it, and I'm going to need to RMA it. But I've got other bigger fish to fry, so you know the board's under warranty for a couple of years, and I'll get around to it. All right, what's our temps now? We're looking at 74. Our max of 87 hasn't gone. We see 90 down here. Okay. All right. It's a little concerning. We still have 6 more minutes to go on the test. That'll actually put us to a 21-minute test. So it'll take it a little further, but the fans are still whisper quiet. I'm not hearing them ramping up at all. I can feel the fluid going through the pipes. There's a vibration to them, and the pipes are warm. So we know that it's staving that heat off and doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I don't believe whether these hoses coming out of the top of the radiator or the bottom are going to make any difference whatsoever to the temperatures we're seeing. I don't know how important that really is. I think the concern is air bubbles, and what that does is it can introduce noise. But other than that, I can't imagine there's any problem. I still may turn it around just to see if it'll fit, but I have a sneaking suspicion with the hard drive cage down there that those hoses simply are not going to go to the bottom without the rest of the case panels getting in the way. So I think it's probably going to stay just like this. Peter VZ has now been a member for 6 months. Right on. Thank you, Peter. Bikeman said he had an Intel 10700 and he was using a stock cooler and it was going 90 to 97 degrees Celsius just doing simple tasks. Finally upgraded to a tower cooler. Well, not the best tower cooler. Interesting. Gregory Howard's got a link to something here. What is this? Oh, yeah, that is one ugly cooler. I guess if all you want to look at inside of your case is a cooler, the Ice Giant Pro Siphon Elite CPU cooler for Intel and AMD got 114 ratings with 4.5 stars. That is one ugly, ugly cooler. Ugh. Okay, so it looks like our updates have finished installing. I'm going to say not now, so we can allow our test to finish because we're just a few minutes away. And if that's as hot as we're getting, I mean, we're right up to the wire here at 92. Is that what I see? The maximum? 91. Yeah, there's a 92 on Core 7. Like I said, 90, 94, 95. That's a little close for comfort for me, so I hope it doesn't get any warmer than 2. Yeah, there's a 94 right there on Core 2. Wow, that hit 94. Yikes. We only have about 3 more minutes left to go. Oh, that's 84, not 94. Got to put on my other eyeballs. Phew, okay, thank goodness. So 84. This whole right side are all the maximum temps we've recorded so far for each of the cores. As you notice, the E cores, the efficiency cores, you usually don't have to worry about them as far as heat. It's those performance cores that are going to get hot. So the temperature on the left is the current temperature for each of the cores. The temperature in the middle is the minimum temperature that's been recorded since we started the software and it started reporting the temps. And in this right side is the maximum temp that it's recorded since we started the software. Joe Justice said his temperatures have gone up to 90 degrees Celsius, but got it down into the 70s by using a Grizzly contact frame. Yeah, I've never seen where those contact frames have made more than a 2 or 3 degree difference. Not quite sure how useful they are. If you've dropped your cooler by 20 degrees by using a contact frame, it sounds like something wasn't sitting correctly. But as long as you got it sorted, I guess that's all that matters. George said his build was an ASRock Pro RS motherboard with an i5-13500, 32 gigs of Vulkan Z RAM, a terabyte FireCuda 530 NVMe drive, and an NZXT H7 case. Well, that's pretty much my 8-year build right there. What do you think of it, George? Is it not the fastest computer you've ever used? These 13500 i5s are insanely fast, faster than yesterday's i7s, and far exceeds the needs of most computer users. You know, to go above that is pretty much overkill and unnecessary for the vast majority of computer users. There are some hardcore users out there, obviously, that need higher performance and higher frequencies, and maybe some gamers, but for the most part, you're not going to really experience, for most people, any performance difference between that i5 and this i9 that I'm using today in regular, everyday tasks. All right, we just now turned at 4 o'clock. That means we've been running the full 21 minutes here on the test. And our final temperatures, I'm still going to let this run while I walk up here. Our hottest temps looks like 92. I'm okay with 92 if that is the peak ultimate hottest temperature we reach. If it won't go above 92 under the highest stress test for over 20 minutes, then I think it's never going to overheat, unless the customer is doing something insane with the computer. So I am very happy with this cooler. I'm happy with its performance. I'm happy with how easy it is to install. I'm happy with the look of it, how quiet it is. I'm not happy with the proprietary power cables on the fans. That's the only part of this I don't like. I really don't understand that. However, fans don't go out as often as they used to. They're making everything better these days, so maybe that's an issue I won't have to deal with. When I hit stop on the test, and we'll watch these temperatures drop rapidly on the left side. Given that these liquid coolers only last, as I mentioned, 3 to 5 years, there's a good chance that the cooler itself will need to be replaced. And when doing that, I would replace the fans at the same time, obviously, with whatever cooler I replace it with is going to come with new fans. So there's a good chance that these fans will never live long enough to wear out, given the length of time a water pump usually lasts. Now that's an average. Some people will have them last longer. Other people, probably most commonly, people are under the assumption their cooler is working. when in fact it truly isn't anymore, or evaporation that has occurred over the years and corrosion that's occurred over the years. So it's not until somebody really analyzes it that we can determine if there's a problem. And honestly, if you're not pushing your CPU that hard to begin with, it's an irrelevant moot point. Chase after a problem that isn't really a problem based on how you use the computer. Okay, so now we're going to reboot with these updates taking effect, and trying to get my OBS screen back. Doesn't want to come back. There it is. Yeah, well, that's a great experience with the EK water block. Maybe we should reach out to them and see if they have some other products for us to review. I purchased this water block. I've not reached out to EK because I've only known them as being a manufacturer of open loop parts where you're going to build your own custom water cooler. I'm not interested in doing that. As I've jokingly said, I don't want to become a plumber. So I've never considered EK prior to solving this problem and researching what other people are doing to cool their 14900K processors. This cooler was mentioned a number of times by people who are clearly enthusiasts and quite excessive in their computer usage and demands. So if it pleases these people, I thought, well, it's worthy of giving it a shot and evaluating it for ourselves. And I'm glad I did. I suspect you'll be seeing more EK water blocks in the future. I'll just have to be sure to order them well in advance. That shipping time of 10 days is ridiculous, but worth the wait. And the price was reasonable. You know, considering how big of a cooler it is and how easy it installs, as long as it's got legs on it, you know, that it'll last more than 3 years, it's good. We've had some coolers that have only lasted a year or less than a year before they die. Those are typically the cheaper, lesser known brands. And it could have just been bad luck, you know, who's to say. Anthony Pete has just become a supporter. Hey, thank you, Anthony. All right, well, that's basically 3 hours of today's show. And let's see, we'll go full screen here on camera 1. Check the phone one more time. And again, I will likely go into the BIOS and turn the RGB off because I think it's going to look great, just all blacked out. Oh, I have an Android update waiting to install. Wow, I just got one on the 1st. Thank you again, Frankie B and Mortant, for your generous Amazon gift cards. Thank you for everybody who's contributed in Super Chat. And thank you to all the members for, again, keeping us free of becoming a corporate puppet. I very much enjoy working with components I'm genuinely interested in that I would potentially or do already use in my business and would recommend to my customers. And that's the same information I want to convey to you guys, the same that I convey to my customers, just on the bigger scale. And you guys make that possible. So thank you for that. I think that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Mortant said, I'm glad you reviewed it. Trusted source. Yeah, they have a couple other models that might be worth looking at, including the RGB model and different sizes of coolers. This is a great, you know what they say about first impressions, you know, this is a great first impression. And I'd be very open to trying some of their other products that are all-in-one products. I'm not interested in building my own cooler. So open loop coolers, you can easily spend $600 to $1,000 just buying all the parts to put your cooler. That's just the cooler. And then deal with potential leaks. And then you have bacteria that grows in your coolant that has to be drained once a year and refilled, which again is messy. It can, again, open an opportunity for more leaks when you're disassembling and reassembling it. What a hassle. So if I'm using a liquid cooler, I only use an all-in-one liquid cooler. The people that do these custom loops are generally doing it for the aesthetic, where they want a special look and they have to melt the pipes and bend them to fit the uniqueness of the case and the design they have in their head. I have other things to do. That doesn't interest me. As I mentioned, that's plumbing. So I'm glad to see and to learn that EK offers all-in-one solutions, because I wasn't aware of that until I went looking for a cooling solution on this 14900K. And I'm glad to report it seems to be working quite well. So I'm having trouble cooling the 12900K, and I might just get the smaller version of this, like the 240, given how well this works. That goes into the Johnsboro case, which still isn't finished yet because of the 12900K being a challenge to cool. If you use any processor that ends in 900K, plan on using a liquid cooler. Just saying. All right. Let me shout out one more time all the contributions today. Ryan One Full with a $1 Canadian contribution. Thank you for that. Peter VZ renews membership, and Anthony Eat became a member. Thank you, guys. 3D Everything, thank you for your contribution. And Daniel, thank you for your contribution. And Gregory Howard, Victor Calendar, Almost Nothing, Richard Palmentier, Nick Caffrey, Ian Gooch, Planet Cryos, PSC Computers Missouri, Dorado Systems, Rasoon Suresh, Ryan One Full again. Slappy became a member today. Thank you, Slappy. Mark Gaines and Rick Lakes, thank you, my friends. Planet Cryos again. Mike Dane Jr. and Sr. Ben Laird, 3D Everything and Planet Cryos again. And our friend in Ireland, Paul O'Brien. Thanks you guys for making these videos possible. And thank you all for just being a part of this amazing community that we've created here that's unlike any other community I've ever experienced on the internet. Friendly, supportive, kind, guaranteed. Where else are you going to find that? If you're watching these videos for the first time, I hope you'll consider joining us in a live video and joining on our chat, because the interaction between the viewers and myself and the viewers and themselves changes the dynamic of watching a video, because now you're involved in it. You become a part of it. And it's a piece that you won't get until you try it. Everybody's always welcome to join us in our chat room. There's no payment required. If people want to support us, we can't thank you enough for that. But it's never expected. It's always appreciated. People do support us. And as long as you're a nice person, it doesn't matter how old or young, what religion or race, what gender, none of that matters. All that matters is that you're nice. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be super smart. In fact, we'd rather that if you were super smart, you didn't have to tell us all about it, right? So however you are is perfect, as long as you're nice. There's no pre-qualifier for anything else other than being nice. So if you pop into the chat, say hello. It's a very simple thing to do. Nobody's going to chew you out. And it's really cool to have people around the world responding to you. And many people have made new friends here in the chat. They live a world apart and would never meet each other otherwise, and have these virtual friendships where the only time they get to see each other is here in the live chat, which is so cool, right? And that's just not even discussing the video content. Hopefully you like the content as well. There is I do have systems available for sale, a couple of the 13500s, as well as this system will be available for sale. It's not a cheap computer, but I will sell it at cost, which means all the labor is free. And I'd even include the shipping within the USA. Because this is so expensive, I'll eat the shipping. So it'll cost me money to sell this computer at cost after I pay for the shipping and I've done all the labor for free. The idea being that the money I make from the video will hopefully make up for it. But that means for somebody out there, you're going to get a heck of a deal on a brand new machine. The same is true with the 13500 builds as well. So if you want to reach out to me privately and let me know what it is you're in the market for, see if we can hook you up, use the About section in the YouTube channel, and the email address to reach out is right there. And just let us know what you're in the market for, what your budget is, and we can let you know if we have anything here that will fit that. We're not going to list all the parts we have. Quite frankly, it's just too much to do. It's a lot of work to inventory everything. But you will see the last couple 13500 builds that we've done, the Intel i5 13500, those systems are all available. So just so you know. That'll wrap it up for me for today. Thank you again to Marlena for setting up today's video. There'll be a thumbnail added and tags and keywords. I'll put her to work on that. I guess I'm thanking her in advance because actually I set this one up very generically because I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing today. In fact, even when I woke up this morning, I wasn't sure, but I'd been leaning on this for about 2 or 3 weeks, really wanting to see what the end result was and what this cooler was like. And I'm so glad I did it. I was hesitant because I knew it was going to take a few hours, but totally worth it. So thank you again to each and every one of you. I will see you all again. I don't know if I'll have time on the weekend, depends on how I'm feeling. Definitely for members on Monday at 1 o'clock. I hope I'll see you then. And every Friday at 1 o'clock, I'm always live. And then with regards to Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, that kind of varies from week to week, depending on my work schedule. The last 2 weeks have been very distracting for me for making videos. That's why it's so important I at least stick with the Monday, Friday thing as a definite, and then everything else is as time permits. And as I mentioned, if you subscribe to the channel, you can turn on notifications to be made aware anytime I'm going live or new videos are posted. Again, be sure to hit the thumbs up button if you like content like this. You want to see more like that, you can let me know by using thumbs up or thumbs down. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. I'll see you all again very, very soon. And until next time, bye for now.